Hi, everybody. Today's March 10th, 2023, and I have an honored guest, a gentleman whose comics I have read, and he's been a mainstay in the comic book world. I'm going to let him explain a little bit about uh, what's been going on in the comic book world and what's been happening with him. This is Mike Barron. Can you tell us a little about yourself and what's keeping your comics from us, and what's going on in the comic book world? What's been the most recent crisis?
Well, the ongoing crises, is the same crisis that's enveloped our entire culture, which is that one faction of the population simply cannot tolerate the other faction of the population. I always say there are two types of people in this world: those who want to be left alone and those who won't leave them alone. The people who won't leave them alone will do anything for power. I've always said that the average American has his hands full doing his job, taking care of his family, and maybe kicking back a little on the weekends to watch football. But there's a certain class of person that spends every waking second scheming how to get power over others. They go into politics for three reasons: to line their pockets at the public expense, to enjoy special privileges that normal people don't have, and to hurt people that they don't like. And that divide has crept into the arts now, as we can see in the world of cinema, which is much more widely known than the world of comics. But the same thing is happening in comics. In the world of cinema, you see that the Academy Award Association just laid down new guidelines that all future nominations must be categorized for so many for certain sexual orientations and races and something. So the quality of the work is no longer the criterion. And this has to do with the left's overwhelming problem, which is the inability to see individual human beings for what they are. They seem to have forgotten Martin Luther King entirely, who asked that people be judged by the content of the character and not the color of their skin. Well, we're on the exact opposite side of this. And comic books, being a pale reflection of entertainment in general, have gone along. I rarely read mainstream comics, but every time I dip back in, uh, I find no entertainment value whatsoever. I find a lecture, a scold, talking points, uh, a lack of originality, and this is because they're hiring people who aren't qualified. I have three reasons, three rules when I write either a novel or a comic, and the number one rule is it's my job to entertain, and I never lose sight of that fact. You have to give the reader a reason to turn the page. The essential question in all fiction is, what happens next? And the reader's not going to turn the page if he doesn't care. And the main way you make the reader care is by telling an entertaining story that enthralls him, her, ze, or it. And that's what I try to do. I'm not going to go into the two other reasons. They're kind of technical for writers, but that's the job number one. And both cinema and comics seem to have forgotten that. And this has caused a wholesale departure in comics by many veteran illustrators and writers, uh, honored honored people. Chuck Dixon, who created Bane, Billy Tucci, who wrote Our Army at War and illustrated it, Graham Nolan, the co-creator of Bane, Ethan Van Sciver, who used to illustrate Green Lantern. They find the present culture of comics, editorial culture, to be anathema to free expression and creation. And one thing we all have in common is that it's our first goal to entertain. And that's why our books are selling. Well, how do we sell our books? We crowdfund our books on platforms. But as you know, these platforms are inimical to conservatives. And according to because of a scurrilous attack on me by the Daily Kos, which is a far left hate site, we were kicked off Kickstarter and Crowdfunder. I sent you a picture of the author of that article.
Yeah,
It should come as no surprise to anyone when they see her, although I apologize if I'm not using the right pronoun. And then
right.
my partner Chris Brawley interviewed the head of Crowdfunder, and he said, we're not going to have anybody associated with Comicsgate on our platform. because we don't like them, because a whole bunch of people told us that they were sexist, racist, homophobes, etc. And none of that is true. It's all lies. And it comes down to the leftist philosophy. Yes, there she is. She wrote this article out of the blue. And the headline was, Mike Baron releases another racist AF comic book. Now, I'll bet you any amount of money this person has never read anything that I've written. She characterized the new book, which she has not seen, there it is, Private American, as racist. But, and I don't get that. There's nothing racist in it because she hadn't read it. So we contacted the Daily Kos, and Markos himself actually responded. And Chris asked, have you read Thin Blue Line? She characterized Thin Blue Line as a comic about white racist cops going into black neighborhoods to kill as many black people as possible. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. The two protagonists of that novel don't kill anyone, in fact. And Chris said, have you read Thin Blue Line? And Markos says, no. So Chris said, would you like to read it? And Markos responded, if I have to. So Chris posted a PDF of the complete book for him to access online. That was 6 weeks ago. And as of today, he hasn't looked at it. That's another thing about these people. They know what they know, and that's all they know, and facts have nothing to do with it. So they left us no alternative. They tarred me as a racist. They're going after my ability to make a living, so we're suing them.
Yeah, no, you have a great a name for the site. Let's see if I can find it for us.
It's Mike Baron versus the
yeah,
scum of the universe.
yeah, here we go. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
So people can find this is a GoFundMe. This is
Yeah.
GoFundMe. Mike Baron. It's also
Versus-
Baron Fight. You see up here. You've raised $5,700. People can share and donate to this. We're raising money for Mike Baron's legal fees to fund a lawsuit against the Daily Kos, their writer, other parties, et cetera, et cetera. So this follows extensive censorship from big tech platforms. And then there's media coverage as well. I'm going to pull some of that. But I'd like to kind of get back to you and the state of comic books and so forth. So, to kind of use a comic book trope, it's like there are a lot of post-apocalyptic, say that 3 times fast, post-apocalyptic comic books out there. And we're sort of in the treatise of that right now. I mean, we're kind of wandering amongst corpses of comics. And then there's, and again, another comic book trope, there's alternate universe. I mean, there seem to be 2 universes out there. Can you talk about that? What's the landscape right now?
Well, as I said, I very rarely read regular comics because most of them, whether they're malicious or not, don't have much entertainment value. There's a great science fiction writer named Theodore Sturgeon. Sturgeon's law says 80% of everything is crap. Wait, that might be 90%. And he's right. I mean, you scroll through TV for hour after hour looking for something that will entertain, and 90% of that is crap. So you got to really look for the good stuff. And once you find it, you stick to it. And there's never enough good stuff. But those of us who crowdfund our own books, and I'm talking about the Comicsgate Kings, which is a small group that you have to be invited into, because anybody can call themselves Comicsgate. And a lot of people do, in hopes of catching a tailwind by association. And some of these people, in my opinion, do not behave very well on the internet. In fact, the internet has brought out the worst in many people. It allows people to attack others sight unseen, like this creature who wrote the article, out of the blue, and to reach a huge audience. And if you've ever been the subject of a cancel campaign, as I have, it's no fun, but you learn a few things. Those of us in the Comicsgate Kings are dedicated to providing entertainment first. Now, it's just my curse that I happen to have chosen hot button subjects for my books. The reason I wrote Thin Blue Line was because 3 years ago we watched city after city burning down, and always some proud member of the Lick Spittle out front explaining that these were mostly peaceful protests. And then politicians, people who had sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution, started calling for defunding the police. And we've seen the result of that. And my reaction was incredulity. You're either for the rule of law or you're not. You're either for civilization or you're for chaos. And civilization requires the rule of law. So I wrote the book, but remember, rule number one, this is a vital, entertaining story that will grab you by the throat on the first page and drag you through to the end, and you'll get irritated if anybody interrupts your reading. That's what I try to do. My first rule is always to entertain, and everybody who's read it says not only is it entertaining, it's one of the best comics they've ever read. Now, the thing about Private American is I used to write The Punisher. I wrote The Punisher for 5 years. And the reaction has always been very positive. People love my Punisher. Even today, they say, why doesn't Marvel understand The Punisher? Why can't they get it right? They can't get it right because they don't want to get it right. In fact, The Punisher has become an embarrassment to them. The creator of The Punisher, who threw him into one book as a ripoff of Don Pendleton's The Executioner, that's all he is embarrassed by the Punisher and lambasts military and police who use the Punisher symbol, which he attributes to their desire to inflict pain on lesser races or whatever. And that's not what the Punisher symbol means. Chris Kyle used the Punisher symbol, and it means defender of the innocent. And that's what police use it for too. One of the reasons I wrote Thin Blue Line is I know a number of police officers, and the cops I know are good people. Now, we all know there are bad cops out there. Nobody denies that. It's just that the overwhelming majority of them are civic minded. They went into the police to make a difference in other people's lives, and many of them have. But as you know, the rhetoric from the left of defunding the police and demonizing them has resulted in the wholesale quitting of police officers all over the country, overwhelmingly in Democrat-run cities. Police suicides are through the roof. They get no support from their local government. Major Democratic strongholds such as Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, Chicago, Minneapolis, downtown are ghost towns now. The last Walmart closed its doors in Oregon because of wholesale looting. They passed laws that said if you steal less than $900 worth of merchandise, don't even bother to report it because it's not even a misdemeanor anymore. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. The reason I wrote Private American is I said, well, there needs to be a Punisher type character that's true to his roots. What would the Punisher be doing today? He'd be down on the southern border, protecting innocent lives, stopping human traffickers, stopping the flow of fentanyl, stopping the flow of terrorists that are rushing over the southern border. And it didn't seem to be a controversial idea. 10 or 20 years ago, it wouldn't be controversial. But today, because the left controls the narrative, the news, entertainment, politics, and education, and because children are no longer trained in civics, they have no knowledge of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, or the Bill of Rights, they buy whatever their teachers tell them. And I don't have to tell you what their teachers are telling them because it's in the news every day. Teachers trying to hide the fact that they're counseling preteens to undergo gender transition and so forth. But so I created this character, Markos Zamora, who's a second-generation Cuban and a veteran who lives in Texas, who watches the complete fecklessness of American law and order. And this is not to condemn the Border Patrol. They'd love to do their job, but they're not given any support and they're not given enough personnel. He says, well, a man can't just sit around. I'm going to go take action in my own hands. He's a vigilante in the classic American sense of Charles Bronson in Death Wish, Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood. America has always loved vigilantes. And one of the reasons is vigilantes settled the West because as the settlers pressed westward, they were way ahead of civilization. Civilization follows the explorer. It doesn't greet them. Most people say, well, there were Indians out there, and that's certainly true. The Indians were out there. But what most people don't know is that every Indian tribe secured its own territory by making war on and conquering a previous Indian tribe that was there. I'm not saying that they're villains, but they're not saints either. They're people like you or me.
Well, they're human beings. I mean, they didn't have, war costumes because they, only sat around peacefully. I mean, they were like every, aggregation. There's teams and you're in or you're out, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they had to defend themselves, and they had war chants, they had war costumes, they had war. Yep. It seems pretty obvious.
Which is not to denigrate the atrocities committed by whites, like, such as the Sand Creek Massacre or the Wounded Knee Massacre. Those are unjustifiable in any sense, and they should be remembered, but it has to be taken in context.
Absolutely right. So what were your favorite comics growing up?
Conan the Barbarian, Master of Kung Fu, Swamp Thing, Captain Marvel. Also, the Uncle Scrooge comics created by Carl Barks. Anybody who wants to make comics, study the work of Carl Barks. He was a master. There's not a wasted word or a panel in anything he ever did. And I loved Undergrounds too. I couldn't get enough of Zap Comics. I love Gilbert Shelton, the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. I love R. Crumb, a whole bunch of those people. And we don't really have anything like that today. We have a new kind of alternate comic scene, which is typified by the Hernandez brothers and Art Spiegelman. And some of their stuff is good and some of it isn't. It's kind of hit and miss. The most entertaining comics I've seen recently are crowdfunded, independently produced. And there's a huge market for these. We've been very successful with our crowdfunders. But the war on conservative thought and entertainment, which covers the entire panoply of entertainment, and you know what I'm talking about. If you speak up your crush, you lose all your contacts. You're no longer welcome. James Woods can't get any work. Kevin Sorbo can't get any work because they're conservative or they declare that they were Christian. There's no room for them in today's Hollywood. And there seems to be a rule out there that you have to virtue signal 24/7 in order to hold on to your job. Well, just something about virtue signaling rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because my second rule of storytelling is show, don't tell. And it's a good rule for life as well. You want to do good works, but don't release a press release about it. Don't have a camera crew following around. Don't constantly yell from the rooftop, I am a good person, I back this, this, and this. And I think the perfect example of that is the I believe sign.
Yeah, no, I know.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know. I mean, virtue signaling is an oxymoron, as is the kind of the other word for it, humble brag. I maintain that social justice is an oxymoron as well, because
absolutely, there's justice when you put a modifier on it.
If somebody comes along and he's white, purple, green, brown, or whatever, and I don't know, bangs your mother upside the head, your reaction's not, oh, well, this, and, circumstance, whatever. No, your natural reaction, and always should be, this guy just banged my mother upside the head. And that's what it is. It's a personal justice. And, we've fortunately offloaded some of our eye for an eye kind of stuff to the establishment, as it were, the state. Either, in the old days when it was a locality, but now it's a big state. And we trust them to follow up on the justice aspect, because otherwise we would take things in our own hand. I've heard a lot of times people argue against nationalism as a bad thing, but nationalism takes the place of tribalism. Tribalism takes the place of internecine battles. Internecine battles take the place of people having hand-to-hand combat every moment of their lives. So we do this as a way of offloading some of these aspects of having to go kill the guy who just smacked your mother upside the head. And that's your natural instinct. But you're just like, well, you know what? I'm going to let justice take over. But if it turns out it's social, that somebody says, oh, well, this person has only this and this person only did that, and this is not justice anymore. Everybody is capable. I always find it the soft bigotry of low expectations, which is the late Michael Gerson's phrase, to think that other people can't get the message that it's not right to shoplift, it's not right to steal, it's not right to bang somebody upside the head, without cause and whatnot. And so, what you're talking about, I mean, you mentioned the $900 limit. There are states who want to, I forget which state it is, who wants to change the age of felony to 25. I think it might be California, because everything's California. But I just read this the other day. It's like, so there are lawmakers who are proposing to, absent the possibility or dismiss the possibility of a felony and a violent crime under the age of 25, because their brains haven't formed. Now, I think, frankly, your brains have formed enough at age 3 or 4 to realize that you can't go, whack somebody upside the head without retribution. And anyway, so it's kind of, and I think you're putting out some very reasonable things. I'm an owner of the Thin Blue Line. I helped your original, I don't know whether it's Kickstarter, crowdfunder, or Indiegogo, but I helped spawn that. Not as much as you did, of course, but I have it gracing my shelves someplace, and I've read it, I've passed it around, so forth. It's not a racist thing. I mean, there are cops of every color. The Memphis incident lately, I'm sure you're familiar with, where there were 5 policemen who happened, again, I don't really care about their skin color. And they got another guy who's, similar skin color, but I don't think that had anything to do with what actually happened. I think what happened, I mean, it could be malfeasance, it could be retribution, it could be that there was, some personal vendetta, it could be that these guys are drunk on power. I don't know what it is, or they're over alert, or there's so much crime that they trigger. I don't know what the thing is. There's a story there someplace, and the story should be told, but it's not necessarily a color lens story, and that's the way everybody still put it, as an evidence of white supremacy. So this racism thing becomes a cudgel by which universally to hit at anything, and so to call something racist or racist as F, I'm not going to use that word here, is absurd. That is racist AF. To just do this application of anybody who's not part of your stream, and whether it's melanin or conservative leanings or an appreciation for genuine police work, appreciation for civil society.
This comes back to the left's inability to see individual human beings and the memory hole to which they've consigned Martin Luther King. The smallest minority on earth is the individual. If you're not for individual rights, you can't claim to be for minority rights. Now, you mentioned nationalism. You and I know that central planning always leads to disaster, famine, war, torture, and death, always. And what we see today in this country is frightening, as Washington seeks more and more power, creates more and more offices, raises more and more taxes. As someone said it the other day, is we now have an enormous government trying to extract taxes from a constantly diminishing private sector. And as I said, they're not interested in the welfare of the people. They want to get rich, they want to enjoy special privileges, and they want to hurt people they don't like. Now, nationalism is the opposite of central planning. Jefferson spoke about federalism with passion because he wanted to make decisions as local as possible, and that's why he wrote the Constitution to give the ultimate choice of what to do to the states and not to the federal government. Because the people who live in the neighborhood know a lot better what they need than somebody in a capital suite uh, 2,000 miles away.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, fortunately, we have some aspects of federalism, and federalism actually kind of an odd term. It's almost an upside down term because,
Right.
frankly, it's not federation. It's the fact that there's division within that federation. So, the individual states and presumably inside the localities can make their decisions that are not from so far top down. We're seeing a lot of the same kind of pushback throughout Europe, which didn't amalgamate into actual states the same way we did. We were much more of a voluntary prospect of the 13 colonies turning into the United States. And I bring this up that the term state, when we think of states, we're thinking of Delaware, Rhode Island. What are these individual things? You can kind of drive over the border. You can drive from Rhode Island to Connecticut, not even be sure which is which. They're not really kind of definitive entities the way, say, I don't know, going from Romania to Ukraine might be. Different languages and different police uniforms and so forth. And maybe a visa or whatever. The international state borders were a thing. So when we became the United States of America, people these days, I think the emphasis is on the word America, United States of America. And so we're all America. But when they founded it, it was the United States of America, that we were supposed to be individual states, much as Belgium. I mean, I'm sure there was a Belgium at the time, but in the late 18th century, whichever states where there were in Europe, those had individual sovereignty. And, so the concept of federalism is that we have kind of division within the states, and we have some greater direct representation, greater direct responsiveness in our towns, in our counties, in our states, and so forth, before it gets to a federal level. So, I'm basically in agreement, but I think people have this misconception, of what a state is in the United States, and it basically meant a nation, and having different abilities to control and monitor what comes down from a federal level is crucial to the American experiment, which has been so far very successful. So to kind of finish up my point here, during COVID, which has been more the focus and topic of my video cast over the last 3 years, the individual states had some preservation of liberty if they chose to, and then the voters had a chance to get rid of the ones who didn't. So, Florida and New York State have the same population essentially, and Florida is older demographically, and Florida did much better during COVID in all aspects. They had a lower death rate, even amongst the old people, and they had far more freedom throughout. And so humans are the same. We pretty much all have belly buttons and most of us fingers and whatnot. But for some reason, people did better in Florida. And whatnot, and that helps us understand and come out with reasonable, rational answers because there are divisions between states. A lot of what's happening, seemingly in the Kickstarter world and whatnot, is that people just collapse under this kind of pressure from above, which is in a sense inimical to the individual and federalist experiment. Sorry for all that.
Well, I agree. It's the tendency of the despot to seek as much power over others as possible. I seriously doubt whether a majority of congressmen, women, Z's, have read the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. To hear them speak, you'd think they have no idea why this country was founded. The first country founded on the primacy of the individual, the only nation on earth to enshrine individual human rights, which spread across the globe because it was an idea whose time has come. But now we are reaping the crop of too much success. There's an old saying that strong men make good times make weak men, and weak men make bad times. And we are in the bad times
Yeah, it seems to be.
portion.
Now, I know you were on with Andrew Clavin, and he is uh, he's my inspiration often days, and it was a great interview. And he thinks we are in the opposite of Renaissance. We're in
Yes,
decay,
yes,
um, and that each of us has to maintain the light. People talk about the Dark Ages, and I think he is probably amongst that group who stipulates that the Dark Ages is a misnomer. They weren't dark; they were ages of perhaps less commerce and less communication, but it wasn't necessarily dark for every individual. It certainly wasn't dark every day for every person. And you have to maintain that light. I mean, one of my other idols and beacons is Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And he went through almost literal hell. I suppose it's technically figurative hell. But, he came out intact. And he came out intact because of his firm belief. He believed in the divine, and he believed in the dignity of man. And I think we're getting away from that. We're getting away from kind of our physical selves and the exigencies and the commonality which have been throughout all of mankind. And the reason we get resonance from old literature is that humans have had feelings. They've had feelings. They've had emotions, pretty much all in keeping with those prior. And I think the timeless, that's kind of an expression in league with this. The timeless works are just that. They are timeless. They carry on because they resonate with us. And it seems to me, I have not read deeply into your, as the French would say, your oeuvre. So I'm not a Mike Barron expert, but I'm going to intend to, look further in. I purchased your Punisher just now. And, I was a Superman, Batman kind of guy. I started with Superman. I read everything Superman. And then I went to Batman. I kind of was DC. I wasn't, so much Marvel until maybe a little bit later. And I read some R. Crumb and whatnot when I was in college. I like comics. I like graphic novels and so forth. But I find that a little bit akin to what you're saying. When my kids were growing up, I purchased them. They really liked, Batman. My older son was Batman for a number of years. He got irritated when he was 4 years old if you called him anything but Batman or the Dark Knight or whatever. And we have the pictures to document that. I know, I'm sorry for embarrassing him, but so we understand and we love the comics. And then they all gone into the Simpsons and whatnot. Family Guy. My younger son is a cartoonist. He's an animator, screenplay kind of guy. But the stories and pictures, I mean, they have literally, or I guess figuratively, animated us for the duration. But through the time when they were kind of into comics, I went and purchased them, and a lot of them were just dead. I mean, I suppose they're all on paper, which is dead trees anyway. But they just didn't have any life to them. I might have been looking in the wrong place, but I was picking up comics, and I picked up some of the same themes as I had grown up with, and there was just nothing really going on. There's nothing, no grab or hook or whatever.
Well, Sturgeon's law.
Right. That's similar to Gell-Mann amnesia. I don't know if you know what that. Have you heard of Gell-Mann amnesia?
No.
So it's another topic, another day. But basically, Murray Gell-Mann was a top physicist, and when he would read an article by somebody else on something else, I don't know. Let's say he's reading an article about art in Mexico. When he actually comes to experience the thing, he really goes back and reads the article. And it's like, wow, this guy knew nothing about this. And I know what it was. When he read an article in physics, he'd be like, oh my God, this guy knows nothing about physics. But the Gell-Mann amnesia was to presume that when somebody else is writing on some other topic about which you're not expert, that they actually know about that. And we all assume that they have the knowledge of that other topic when they knew as little about physics. From his lens of knowing physics, he could see that people probably didn't know as much about other things that they're espousing they know about. And we've seen this happen over and over again. I think a lot of things, the great conspiracy, the COVID conspiracy turns out to have been on, an inside job. And we're finding out more and more. So, there's kind of this lens where people either, seek out and find the truth or not. And again, getting back to Andrew Klavan, he's an excellent writer. I just not only like listening to his podcast, but I've read his books, and so I wish there were more of them because I'm running out in a sense. But he talks about the way that fiction brings out the kind of the truth of the soul. That even if obviously it's fiction, so the events are not true in the sense they're happened, but they bring out things that resonate with us. And there's good fiction, bad fiction based on how well those things happen. And I think that's what you're getting at when you talk about entertainment. I'd be curious if you can maybe capsulize the other two rules by which you live as a cartoonist.
Sure. Number one, entertain. Number two, show, don't tell. And this means that any information you can impart to the reader or the watcher visually without talking points, you should. And there's no better example of this than the beginning of many episodes of Better Call Saul, where a camera takes us on a silent journey for about 5 minutes, in which Jimmy is working at Cinnabon, or Mike Ehrmantraut is trying to get a fake pass to enter a warehouse, and at the end of the 5 minutes you say, "Oh, I get it." And of course that's doubly important for comics because they don't control the pace or what you hear. But unfortunately, it's a very hard lesson to learn.
Hmm.
And the third
Yeah.
rule is to be original.
Yeah. I have to say, I had a little bit of, as I mentioned, I kind of have a love of comics. And I don't know if I told you about this, but my thing lately has been figuratively or literally overturning Zika, the pandemic that never was. So I'm going to maybe just as part of my own selfless self promotion or humble brag or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to just pop up my book here, and I'm going to make it topical in a second. So this is my book, Overturning Zika, which hopes to bring up the fact that the last pandemic was, a lot of conjecture that got whipped up into science, as it were, quote unquote science, too quickly. And I tell people there's a picture of me right here. And so you can buy this on Amazon. So that's my plug. I apologize. But
No problem.
one of the things I did along the way was, if I can find it here, let me just pull this down while I look. Where did I put it? I just passed by it. So here it is. I don't know if I told you about this, but I actually made a comic book, The Truth About Zika. And this is the Intrepid Reporter. And it takes place in Brazil, 2015. The news kind of come up one narrative. He wants to bring the truth about the fact that there was not really, a lot of this just came about through press leaks and was never really confirmed science. And he gets booted from his newspaper. Anyway, I'm not going to do the whole cartoon here, but I saw the modality of cartoon as a way of getting the people who are not going to read the scientific journals and not going to read. I have an article in the American Journal of Medicine. I have this book I mentioned. People are not going to read that, but more, sitting on the bus back and forth to work. And by the time I thought, comic book would be a good way of doing that. So I'm going to be putting that out. Maybe offline, I'll catch some of your advice. I'm sure there's going to be harsh criticism because the story is not written by you. The story was written. I had a storyteller help me with it, but it's kind of hard to wedge a little bit of this is intending to be didactic. It's intending to bring a message and so forth. So it's not going to be just kind of free floating as much as it might. But I'm still hoping it'll catch with an audience, and maybe I could leverage some of your thoughts on that at a later date.
Me too.
So we're rounding around 40 minutes here, and I'm going to maybe just pop over some of the sites that are of interest, and maybe you could kind of give us some closing words and thoughts about what your situation is. What are your warnings for people heading out into the comic book world, and or what's your message to places like Kickstarter?
Kickstarter, we don't know yet, but as I said, they deplatformed us, and they're impossible to communicate with. You send them a message and there's never any response. So in that sense, they're not very user friendly, and there's now a land rush among independent comic producers to create their own crowdfunding sites, and we're working on that too. Because we can't trust these people. If they don't like your story, what you have to say, they're going to try and destroy your livelihood.
Yep. All right. So how? Let's see the ways that people can get in touch with you. I suppose the best way is to help support your cause here, and that's this. Well, I guess you mentioned here on Fire, which is kind of a free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of speech site. I had your Indiegogo up here. Um,
If you want to
that's
order the book, you have to follow the link, which is theprivateamerican.com. Theprivateamerican.com. That'll take you
right.
right to the Indiegogo page. Because otherwise, we're shadow banned. You can't find it if you just go to Indiegogo and type in my name or the
That's
name of the book.
interesting. So let's just try that. If we put in Mike Barron um, into Indiegogo, I mean, I'm on your page right now, but if I search for
Right.
Mike Barron on Indiegogo, um,
It's got Thin
oh,
Blue
there's
Line.
Thin Blue Line. So that's progress, I
Yeah.
guess. And so you're working on there are a few other projects, I guess. Are
Well,
these
there's a
also
bunch of
you?
books I've done in the past. Smokes the Fox is about a dope smoking mutant fox in Colorado. That wasn't my idea. I was hired to write it, but I'm very proud of it. Uh, Off-Worlder was not my idea, but I was hired to write it, and I'm very proud of it. Uh,
All right.
but my campaign's not the only one being shadow banned. All of my friends are shadow banned as well, and these are some of the major creators in comic history. I ran through their names previously.
All right. All right. Well, do you have any questions for me at all, or do you want to?
No, Randy, except you and I are going to talk later about your own work and your comic book work. And so
Yeah,
I'd
I
love
could use a
to.
little bit of hints about. I was thinking about. I kind of want to make this part. So this is. I'm just going to lay out this scenario. Um, Zika microcephaly was supposedly a PHEIC, public health emergency of international concern, aka pandemic. Mosquitoes that cause dengue, and Zika is basically there's four dengues, and really Zika is like the fifth mini dengue. Had never caused a single human problem, and dengue had millions of cases had never caused microcephaly. And in that context of basically a dengue all of a sudden causing microcephaly, it was leaked to the press. It turned into this huge panic, and I'm not going to bore you with it. So that was its own thing. So why do we care about that now? I mean, I care about it because I think you can't say something like that without having it retracted. And everybody who's getting paid to do Zika researching, they have no interest in having the thing overturned.
That's right.
They're kind of on the sea above, the financial thing that happens. Um, but I think from I'm kind of I like to think I'm a logical guy. I used to love Sherlock Holmes, even more than the comics and whatnot. And I thought this is a Sherlock Holmes mystery, and I think I've uncovered the answer of what happened. Anyway, be that as it may, why is this a concern now? Because uh, they're coming out with a Zika vaccine momentarily, probably within the next year or so. And my guess is it's going to be monetized. That Zika has not been monetized yet, and so
That's right.
literally a billion, if not the entire Earth, this will be one more vaccine that people are going to have to get, so that when when young women are impregnable, they won't have babies with microcephaly. Now that's a awesome idea, if in fact Zika caused microcephaly. Microcephaly is its own thing, just means small head, has occurred forever prior and will still occur from a variety of reasons I'm not going to get into. It's a very rare occurrence, one in a few, probably 1,000 births and whatnot. But my feeling is that this is going to happen. The WHO is going to impress upon people to, get this vaccine, and it's going to become a moneymaker for probably Takeda, Sanofi, Moderna, maybe others. Anyway, you got the sun in your eyes. Maybe it might be a good time to
Not anymore.
um, to get going. So that's my worry about that. That's why I think it's a big deal. That's why I want to have the comic book. I want to importune the WHO and everybody so that we can stop and think before we do stuff. Because stopping and thinking seems not to be part of the mechanism apparatus. I don't think whatever his name is, Markos. His name is longer than Kos, but I think his name is Kos is from Markos. I think his Greek name. But anyway, I don't think he thought about it. I don't think Starr Mignon thought about it too much. You are a thinker. I mean, anybody that comes off using the word scurrilous in natural conversation. I mean, I think you're a thinker way above and beyond what people might associate with comic books. Certainly not I. And I, appreciate you spending your time here with us today.
Thanks, Doc.
All right. Any closing words for our fans?
Yeah, if you want to talk to me, follow me on Twitter at Bloody Red Baron, on Facebook, The Comics and Novels of Mike Baron, on Substack, Mike Baron, and I have my own website, bloodyredbaron.com, which needs upgrading.
All right. Lovely. All right, so you can stay on. We can chat for a second. I'm going to end the recording. Thank you very much. Please pass it around. Please share. I don't have a Patreon or anything like that, but if you want to send me money, we'll try to, maybe just small denominations, send it to my address. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Okay.